Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Cara Pryor. If you don't already know me, I'm president of James Publishing and founder of our Marketing Amplifier program. I hope you're all doing well. Really great to see a bunch of familiar names as well as quite a few new folks. So welcome to everyone. We're excited to have Nick Werker of Answering Legal here joining us today. Hi, Nick. How's it going?
It's going good. We were talking about the weather, and I'm excited to meet everybody. I see a few familiar names here, so maybe you guys know me, or maybe you don't. But now you get to put a name to the face behind the Answering Legal website.
Yeah, we're excited to get your perspective for sure. So you'll hear from me first, then Nick will take over, and then we'll actually end the session with an open live Q&A, sort of ask us anything. And please feel free to submit your questions anytime throughout the session. You can use the Zoom chat, you can use the Zoom Q&A function, probably see it either near the bottom or the top of your screen, but ask us anything and we'll make sure that we get to all of those questions at the end. So like we always do, we want to kind of get right down to business, don't want to waste time. So today we're talking about your intake process. Your intake is costing you clients, and we're here to show you specifically how to fix it today. So, I mean, you already know your intake, it's critical. It's critical to sort of making a good first impression on those prospects and on your new clients and really kind of keeping your law firm running smoothly. But, you know, I talk to so few attorneys who actually take the time to kind of specifically improve this area. Nick, would you agree?
I really would, and obviously we're going to get into it, but the amount of people that especially I used to talk to, I used to be in sales where I would tell them, we'll do the intake for you, and they're like, oh, an intake? What do you mean? And I'm like, oh, you don't have any customizations you want to make to the questions. So it's something that people glance over. They think, just getting your marketing in order and making sure that the calls are generated to your firm is number one, but you really can't do much with that if you don't have a plan in place.
Right, exactly. Just really quick, Leonard, yes, there will be a replay available. Recording will be automatically sent to everyone, so don't worry about that. But Nick, yeah, you're absolutely right. And really with kind of a few tweaks and sort of processes in place, you can really dramatically increase the number of clients you're signing and really dramatically improve kind of the intake process in general. So even if you're a solo, small firm practitioner, many of these tips will really still apply. So here's a quick preview into what we'll cover. Nick and I are going to show you today how to mystery shop your firm to identify those problems, record calls, and kind of how to provide tips to your phone team. We'll talk about greeting and welcoming customers to your firm kind of after you've generated those leads. Understand the importance of legal intake and just sort of meeting the customer's needs and how critical that really is. We'll talk about setting up processes for success that make follow up and sign up even easier, more streamlined. And then we'll talk about also using videos to kind of establish trust, distinguish yourself from the competition, and really, set yourself apart. So let's dive right in. Monitoring your intake calls. So, I always like to ask, how many leads are you losing due to your sort of poor phone work, right? That's a really important question to ask. And if you're not sort of periodically listening to your firm's intake calls, you're likely overestimating their quality and maybe even in their consistency too. So it's really important, you can kind of quickly assess your intake people, your intake process, if you record those calls and just occasionally listen to them. I always recommend kind of starting small. So focus on the short calls first, right? You can kind of learn why a complete intake wasn't conducted. Why was the call so short? You can really identify some shortcomings pretty quickly that way. And again, really the easiest way to identify sort of potentially mishandled calls is to listen to them, is to record them. And, the recording itself can be done in several different ways. If you use kind of a VoIP phone system, if you use call tracking software like CallRail, there are several different ways to actually record the calls. But the key is to kind of do it and listen to those recordings. And you can really kind of self-test, sort of, self-shop your firm. Ask a colleague, ask a couple friends to make a few mystery shopper calls to your front desk, right? It's a great way to do it, but please kind of conduct these tests. You may find, a pretty big problem that once corrected can have a big impact. And it might be a pretty easy fix. You're just not aware of the problem until you kind of conduct some of these tests. So Nick will definitely touch on more of these kind of specific intake tips later. So I'll sort of move on to the post-call lead follow-up. What do I mean by that? So specifically meaning, how are you following up with those prospective clients once they've called your office, right? But they're not signing up right away. And I always say the easiest and probably the most memorable way, to stand apart is with prompt and compelling responses to all of your new leads, all of your new clients. And prompt is really important there. Because as I put on the slide, the surest way to make those wows happen is with automated sends of helpful information. Try and automate as much of this as you can, right? Create a process, create as much, build in as much automation as you can so that you're not trying to manually, kind of juggle all of these varying balls, right? It's not sustainable, and you won't be able to kind of keep on top of everything, and it won't be a long-term commitment, right? So that's why we'll get a little bit more into the automation piece, but that part is really important, and really kind of to persuade new leads that you and not your competitor down the street, you are the right attorney to retain. We recommend immediately emailing a pretty meaty, pretty comprehensive package of practical educational information. So I want to show you an example of what we call a shock and awe package. So on this slide, this is actually a look at the shock and awe package that we use as part of our marketing amplifier program. I use it to show you an example of something that you could certainly, if you have the time, certainly produce. We include 100 to 300 page book, a couple of booklets, an educational practice brochure. Obviously, as our subscriber, you gain access to a ton of content. Your shock and awe package, if you're doing it yourself, it certainly doesn't need to be that comprehensive, but put something together that is educational, that's valuable, that's impressive, that you can kind of automatically send to these prospects. And then what we do on behalf of our attorney subscribers, we then follow this shock and awe package with a lengthy educational nurturing drip sequence, an email series that can, really ideally go on for months, 6 months, 12 months, maybe even. It's quite a bit of work kind of upfront to write this stuff, but once you have it, it can be pretty evergreen, right? It can, with just a few tweaks, you can really use this stuff kind of year over year. Educational nurturing sequence, and then make follow-up calls, to your prospects. And so we recommend impressive first package, follow-up calls, and then an ongoing educational nurturing sequence. And for new clients, we basically suggest a parallel, very similar approach, especially if there is a time gap, a lag between kind of retention and when that visible work is done, right? We're kind of, with this sequence, we're really trying to kind of avoid the new client buyer's remorse is almost, how I describe it, because, when there is that gap between retention and when they see, the work that's being done on the case, there can be that, oh, did I make the right decision? Is anything happening? What's happening? So follow up with new clients with an impressive package of educational materials. Again, the whole point is to explain what's going on kind of behind the scenes. You're hard at work on their case. They need to know that. What lies ahead, what will be expected of them, what they can expect of you, just what the process looks like, right? And then kind of detail the work that your firm is doing, kind of what challenges need to be overcome specifically so that your new clients really understand the value and really the amount of work that you're taking on their behalf. Quick look at a welcome kit, the welcome kits that we include in our program. Again, they're similar to the shock and awe packages. I just wanted to show you a quick look. I can send more detailed samples if you're interested in spending more time with this stuff too. Okay, so another kind of moving right along. Another sort of key piece of the intake puzzle that I feel like it's often overlooked is reducing calls from unqualified leads, to begin with, right? So you don't want to kind of waste your time or your team's time on fielding calls from prospects that you feel like you simply can't help for one reason or another, right? So we recommend adding some simple sort of qualifying questions, to your website lead forms, really anywhere that your prospects are kind of coming through to contact you, that almost help the prospect themselves self-determine whether counsel is needed. So on this slide, I've actually included some potential questions. I mean, you probably know better than anyone the questions that would kind of help you weed out or help you really qualify the folks that you're really looking to help or that you can help. But I'll just run through these recommendations quickly. So if you're a bankruptcy firm, maybe that means, is it time for me to file? Business litigation, do I have a winning breach of contract claim? Estate planning, do I need an attorney to draft my estate plan? Family law, should I retain an attorney for my divorce? Injury, do I have a case? Social Security disability, maybe it's will I qualify for benefits? And then, kind of very closely tied to this is establishing trust with videos. Attorneys ask me all the time, what's the easiest way to distinguish myself? How can I stand out from the competition, stand out from kind of every other attorney that's out there? Video tends to be the easiest way to do this. So really kind of the most effective way to persuade prospects that you have the knowledge, you have the talent, you have the skills to handle their specific legal matter is to show them a past case or a past transaction that's very similar to their own. And a great way to do this is to outline past cases through videos. So the larger your collection of videos covering a variety of legal matters that you've handled, the better your odds of matching one with a prospect situation. Does that make sense? So, you have visitors coming to your website, for instance, they have a very specific legal issue. They're going through a specific situation. They're looking for an attorney who has handled something similar. They watch your videos and they say, wow, that is really similar to what I'm going through. Obviously, that's a great opportunity to kind of establish the trust, start building that trust. And it means that your collection of past cases or past transactions should sort of be an ongoing effort. This should be a kind of ever-growing collection of past case videos with sort of varying fact patterns, right? If you're going to create one category of video, I really recommend that this be the one. So, talk about past cases and how you've handled them. Ideally, each video, would cover just one case, should maybe be between 2 and 4 minutes, no longer than that, but it should be a story kind of told in chronological order so that it's very easy to follow and very relatable. So ideally, you'll get in the habit of shooting these videos every time a case concludes, right? Bake it into your process so that this is something that is ongoing and something that is helpful to your prospects and your clients as well. So I just wanted to really quickly play a quick sample of a past case video that we recently created for one of our injury subscribers here in Orange County. Let me just play a few moments of it so you can get a sense of what I mean.
At Russell and Lazarus, not only do we handle regular auto accidents and slip and falls, we also handle catastrophic injuries. We had a case where a 60-year-old gentleman was riding his motorcycle with his lovely wife on the back of the motorcycle. The motorcycle lost control and his vehicle ran into a boulder on the side of the road. He suffered quadriplegic injuries and essentially succumbed to his injuries and passed away. His poor wife also suffered severe.
So you can imagine how someone who's scared, someone who's going through a situation where they really pretty desperately need some help, how that could be, really helpful, comforting, and compelling. When they're looking for someone to help them, they don't know much about their legal situation. They don't know anything about you. Building that trust.
At Russell and Lazarus,
building that trust is so important. And going along with that, really sort of stand out from the competition with these videos. Endear yourself to prospects by detailing your passion for helping clients and explaining what brought you to the law and your specialty. This is another great use of video, right? Your prospects want to know that their case will be handled by someone who cares, someone they can trust. So I mentioned this so that I can show you another quick sample of this style of video too, which we highly recommend.
What actually got me into the practice of law? It's a very interesting question. I never really thought I was going to be a lawyer until I had one thing in particular happen to me. When I was growing up, my sister Laura, she was 9 and I was 11 at the time. I had 2 older sisters, but my youngest sister ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. And so I grew up with cancer in the household. And when she was 19, she unfortunately passed away. I'm from Indiana. And my parents didn't know what the heck they were doing as far as the estate side of things and handling my sister and what happened. And because of that, I kind of saw attorneys and what they had to do to help out my family. And it really got me interested in the practice of law. And that's how I ended up going to law school. And I thought I would be an estate planning attorney.
So I hope that just gives you a little bit of inspiration into, you know, the type of video that I'm talking about. Really, really effective in building that trust, distinguishing yourself, and really just better preparing your prospect to kind of be a better client. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to kind of pass it over to Nick. Just think that, you know, he's really going to cover some more specific practical intake tips, which are wonderful. And I'm excited about that. But don't forget to keep asking those questions in the chat box. We'll get to all of them at the end of the session. Quite a few good ones have come through already. So I've banked those and we'll get to all of them. But Nick, do you want to go ahead, share your screen and take
Yeah, let's do it. Kara, you did such a great job in explaining. Up, host disabled. Can you enable me? It says green, but you did such a beautiful job in explaining how attorneys can really leverage, you know, their personal stories. And I see that a lot. Is I not worked with really, but recently I was speaking with a video company and they were showing me like demos of what they had created for other firms, and it's all about really connecting with the customer through, you know, you have to do it emotionally because people make decisions emotionally. They don't really make decisions with logic as much as we would like them to. But if you can connect with somebody emotionally, that's really going to be your biggest selling point. But my name is Nick Werker. I'm the marketing director here at Answering Legal. My expertise lies a lot more in.
What actually got me into the practice?
Excuse me.
Oh, I thought somebody was talking and asking a question. So my expertise lies more in answering phone calls, doing legal intake, setting up processes for success. So what I thought would be a really cool introduction would be talking about the importance of the greeting when you actually answer the phone for your law firm and what you should be saying. But just in case you don't care about me, hold on, I should do how do you do the present? There we go. In case you want to know anything about me, I've been with this company, Answering Legal, for over 6 years. I'm experienced in creating superior interactions for my potential clients. I've onboarded thousands of firms using just these methodologies that I'm going to teach you about. I've been teaching lawyers how to do this for the last 6 years. And this is true. I was going to leave him home today because I was nervous he's going to be awake. But my dog is over there in the corner. His name is Alfie. I apologize in advance if he barks. So let's talk about greetings. So why are they important? What makes a good greeting? And then I have a few what I call horror stories, but I think that they're pretty funny. So I've been saying this forever, is greetings are so important because you have such a small window of time to really capture somebody's attention when they call into your firm. And I know this to be true because what I really combat is voicemail. You know, I'll speak to lawyers all the time who are like, oh, you do what my voicemail does. People leave me messages and then I call them back. And, you know, it's just so much more complicated than that because people want to talk to somebody right away and they want to make sure that they're talking to the right person. So 80% of callers will just hang up on your voicemail right away, which just tells me that the introduction is so important. The greeting is so important. So what you want to do in your greeting first is you want to let them know that they've reached the right place, that they're in the right place for help. So what I always tell people is, you know, answer the phone politely. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for calling the law office of, and then your name. So if I had a law office, I would teach everybody who worked for me and my answering service, or myself, I would train myself as well to answer. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for calling the law office of Nick Werker. How may I help you today? So the 3 steps are: you welcome the caller. Good morning, good afternoon. Nice and polite. Knowing the time of day helps. Sometimes you say good afternoon. Introduce yourself and your firm. You want to let them know that, you know, they've reached the right place, that they didn't dial the wrong number, that they've reached a law office. And then you want to have a call to action. You know, you want to sort of continue the conversation. If you just say, you know, good morning, law office, they're going to be like, hey, is this the law office of Cara Pryor, or is this a shared receptionist? You know, it's a little off-putting. So you want to let them know right away who you are and what you want them to do. So how may I help you starts the conversation, and lets them sort of say like, hey, I'm calling you for this uncomfortable reason. You know, let's talk about this. So I wanted to talk about a funny horror story. Is I have thousands of customers who have come and go, and you know, so I think it was about 2 years ago, I get an email, and I'm copied on all the support interactions. And this guy, he said that we weren't pronouncing his greeting properly when we were answering his calls. And he signed his email, and I couldn't find it, but he signed it, the law office of Nick Werker, strong voice, sound mind, or something like that. And I'm just like, you're doing a little too much there. You definitely want to stand out, but I thought it was funny, and it stuck out with me this whole time that, you know, just don't do too much. That's all I'm going to say. So I want to talk more about legal intake. That's obviously why we're here. Legal intake, how-tos, how not tos. But I see a lot of law firms will either do way too little or not enough at all. And what I mean by that is, you know, once you get past the greeting, and you go to ask the questions, a lot of law firms will just ask somebody for a name and a phone number. And then, you know, if it's a receptionist, they'll say, oh, somebody will get back to you. We'll call you back. What's a good time? You know, nothing is really targeted and qualified for that lead. And I used to be in sales. So for me, it was always important to have these 3 or 4 questions answered. And I know that that's true for law firms because you guys are providing a service. You'll always want to have, you know, the ammunition to really convince somebody to choose your law firm, to sign up with you, to retain you, and ultimately make money. That's all our goals, right? Obviously, we want to help people, but you know, you can't stay open if you don't make any money. So here are my rules, really, and obviously there's exceptions to a lot of rules, but don't inundate the caller with questions. I will talk to law firms who, you know, at the onboarding process with me, will send me a list of 12 to 15 questions that just completely will turn somebody away. I don't want to answer 12 to 15 questions. I want to prove to me that I should hire you before I answer all these questions and waste my time with you. And then, like I said, that people will do too little. They'll only get a name and a phone number, and then they don't really have anything to talk about. They don't know the facts of your case. They can't tell you the nuances of what they'll be able to do for you. And the third one, and this is vitally important, and you touched on this, Cara, is you want to have a plan for what's going to happen as soon as you're done asking those legal intake questions. So if you have a process set up where every time you get a new lead, the lawyer, right, the main person, the owner, the principal, or the person who's really the person who's going to sign up that caller, you want to give the caller a call to action, right? So instead of just saying, you know, somebody will call you back, give them some homework. So what I like to do is I like to ask either what's the best time to call you back, or you can schedule an appointment, or have a plan like what Cara was saying. Send them some email follow-up, some targeted information where they could learn more about your firm and what you're going to do for them, what you actually have to offer. And just anything to get them participating in this conversation. So here are the do's. I usually limit all legal intakes to 4 or 5 targeted questions. And one of the most important things that you can do, and this is hard, this is one of the things that you kind of have to train yourself on, but and get really good at, is you want to mirror the caller's tone and mood. So, you know, sometimes people will call you and they're in a good mood. You know, they're calling about I don't know, a lot of legal problems are pretty emotional, but I could see somebody calling up and being pretty jovial, like, hey, how's it going? I'm calling about this, haha, making a joke about it. And if they're joking, you want to joke back with them. You want to be lighthearted. You want to put them at ease, you know, not be so serious that they're like, oh, like this guy's too serious for me. But if they're not joking around and they're really serious and upset and frightened, you don't have to sound upset and frightened, but you can sound reassuring. You can sort of be more serious with that caller because they're not looking for somebody to alleviate the tension. They're looking for somebody to sympathize. So that's just one of the things that I always find is really, really important. We teach that to all our receptionists here. Is it really, because a lot of people will call up and these are really hard things to talk about. So a lot of people, they become irate very quickly. So one of the things you can do in order to ease the tension and not escalate is to mirror the caller's tone or mood. And this is like mistake number one that I always hear people make is they don't write down the information. So if you're not using a software that's tracking your calls and not tracking, recording your calls, or if you are, then you don't really have to write it down. You can go back and rely on the recording and transcribe things afterwards. But you want notes on this person. Otherwise, you're never going to remember to call them back. Even if it's the one person for the day, I forget everything. I'm so forgetful. If I don't write it down on paper, I'm never going to remember it. So just make sure that you have some sort of intake script where you can take notes and really remember that person. The person wants to be remembered and you want to remember. You want to be able to call them back and convince them that your firm is the way to go because you remember everything that you guys spoke about. So the best legal intakes are 4 to 5 targeted questions. Selling your service requires knowledge of the PNC's potential new client, the potential new client's problem. So you want to get their information and then let the caller know what you can do for them. That's like the number one thing that I was taught in sales is, you know, if I was qualifying a lawyer, I want to know what type of law that lawyer practices. I want to know who's handling their phone calls. Is it them? Are they letting that call go to voicemail? Are they spending money advertising? So are they interested in picking up new clients? Are they active? And so that way, when I would speak to lawyers, I could say, listen, you're spending money on advertising. You clearly care about getting new clients. So why would you send those new clients to the voicemail? Because I know you're using voicemail, right? And then we talk about the type of law, so I can tell them what I can do for them specifically. So in my case, I'll keep it in the eye. In my case, if I'm talking to a lawyer who practices criminal defense, I can tell them, hey, you're missing out on those people calling you when they get a DUI at 1 o'clock in the morning because you're sending that call to voicemail. I've gotten all this information from the lead, right? And then I can tell them what I can do for them. So I'll give you my best criminal defense intake example, my favorite 4 to 5 questions that I would recommend if I was doing this on the phone. So I'll tell them, hey, if somebody calls me, not only will I get them get the name and number of that person and send that to you, I'll get the charge, you know, the type of arrest that they're dealing with. I'll get the date of the arrest. I'll get the county or municipality that they're in, and I'll get their next court date. So that this way, when you call them back and you tell them how you're going to help, you already know exactly what you're dealing with. You know a few details of the case. You know how urgent it is. You know the county so that you know all the legalities that I don't know much about. But you know the nuances of how you're going to deal with it. And you know their next court date, so you can be available. And that's just one example of things that we do for customers, but just knowing the problem and being able to address it is just vitally important. So setting up processes. I love this GIF. If anybody doesn't know who this is Joel Embiid. His nickname is The Process. And this is my number one thing that I recommend to every law firm. And Kara, you touched on this too, is you need to have a process for really all of the separate things that we're talking about. You need to have a process for the greeting. So, you know, you can put in good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for calling the law office. How may I help you? Right? That's a process. You have to teach everybody that repetition. This way you don't answer the phone and just fumble away. Oh, thank you for calling Cara. How can I, it doesn't work that way. The more that you repeat things, the better you're going to get at it. So everything that I just talked about requires setting up some sort of standardized process, right? So we have the standard greeting that you use when you answer your phone. You have the standard legal intake for each type of law that you practice. And so I want to talk why processes, right? There's less room for error. Practice makes perfect. And, every time that I go to, I'm not a good cook. My wife is a very good cook, but she likes when I cook because she doesn't have to. So she can just stand there and she knows how to like mix things. I can't. I need a recipe. I need to follow things in order to be successful. And that's largely what I've done with everything that I've set up here. So I want to talk about some of the processes and how you can set up processes for your firm so that you can be successful. So one of the things that I recommend so highly is to have a plan for who is going to answer your firm's phone and when. So I call this the planned dispatch schedule, right? So if you're a solo attorney, you have a pretty easy and simple plan to follow. But you can do some other additional things, right? So if you have just a law firm with a desk phone, when you leave the office, you can forward your office line to your cell phone. And that way, every time I'm out of the office, it doesn't just go to voicemail. I can still talk to people and introduce them to my firm and follow the greeting and the legal intake and talk to them and retain them, right? But, maybe you have a receptionist and an associate, and the receptionist just answers the calls all day, and you and your associate want to speak to all the potential new clients after hours and on the weekends, but you don't have anybody set to answer those calls. So, one time you'll forward the call to yourself, you'll leave for the weekend and you're not available. You have something going on. It's important to, first of all, you have to communicate in order to set this up, but you're going to want to have a schedule where that the associates answer the calls on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You get the calls on Tuesday and Thursday, and you alternate weekends, right? So this way, there's no question about who's going to take the phone calls when you leave for the office on Monday evening. You have a process set up, and we set this up. I'll just give you a good example for all our customers who, even if they have 24-hour answering with us, you still want to know who's going to be able to take transferred calls, who's going to be calling those people back in order to make sure that you're retaining them or they're speaking to an attorney before they call somebody else, and that requires like an on-call schedule. So we know that on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, we're going to call Cara for everybody who reaches out to James Publishing. And on Thursdays and Fridays, we're going to reach out to Nick for anybody who calls and make sure that he gets the message. And then the last thing that I always recommend is if you have multiple people and they're different, they're better at different things. So say Cara is really good at talking to all of the criminal defense lawyers who reach out to her firm. Well, I'm going to want to make sure that Cara gets on the phone with all the criminal defense people. And maybe I'm really good at talking to estate planning attorneys, and I'm going to make sure that all the estate planning attorneys want to talk to me. So I think I'm taking up a lot of time. I'm going to stop now. That's my number one recommendation. I hope I made sense and didn't talk too fast. I've talked very fast, but I'll stop sharing now.
No, Nick, tons of practical kind of use today knowledge, which I love. I think there's tons of takeaways in your presentation, which I definitely appreciate. We had quite a few questions submitted before the presentation and several during too. So let me share my screen again, just so that in case anyone's interested in contacting us, I'll just kind of leave this screen up. We love talking about this stuff. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Nick. Any questions, any marketing intake related questions, feel free to reach out. But let's check out some of these questions. So first, How much do your videos cost? I got a question. So I'm assuming that that's in reference to the custom videos that we include as part of our marketing amplifier system. We include monthly videos. So every month you're getting a custom video. We conduct virtual Zoom shoots, get the footage that we need. Then our team of in-house video editors really produces something pretty impressive for you each month so that you are growing. You're kind of building a collection of these past case videos, of frequently asked question videos, of kind of about the firm videos. So that is one element of our $695 per month marketing amplifier program. So there's about 10 different elements, but that is one, and it's part of that. So thanks for that question. And then we had a question actually, Nick, about your pricing. Maybe you can talk quickly about answering legal pricing and kind of how that works.
Sure. So yes, we do charge monthly. We start at $150 a month, but it really all depends on how much volume that your firm does on the phone. So it's all customized. What we do is we'll give you a free trial. We'll measure your minute usage during the free trial, and then we'll offer you a minute package moving forward. So the average person pays anywhere from $250 to like $500 a month. And that's a per minute cost of anywhere from $3 to like $2. Again, it all depends on how much you use. It's 24 hours. And if you're interested in that, you can go to my website and request a quote, and we'll obviously work up a customized quote for you.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. This is a good question for you, Nick. So how long should a consultation be scheduled after the initial intake call? What's the most amount of time in between? Is there something, do you have any advice here? I don't know that there's really a standard here, but what do you suggest there?
I would always suggest, and this is a great question, Anthony. I really thank you for this question. I would always suggest as soon as possible, because you want to strike while the iron is hot. You don't want to get to that point where they have what Kara was talking about with the buyer's remorse. And a lot of these issues are urgent anyway. So, I would just want to make the client seem like they're really important and try to get them to schedule a consultation with you really soon after. If you have the time after you've performed the intake and you've qualified them to be a good candidate for you, I would go ahead and say, if you have time now, I'm happy to give you a consultation. Otherwise, I would give them at most a week out of your time whereby they could schedule that consultation. Especially now with Zoom, it's pretty simple. You don't have to have them come in anymore. But that's my recommendation.
I totally agree, Nick. Yeah, I mean, why not at least try and calendar that while on that initial intake call, right? And if they're, perhaps not ready to schedule that right then, email them, pretty regularly and pretty quickly, pretty promptly with a link. Hopefully you have a scheduling link, right? So that they can kind of self-set with your firm. But I agree, if they're qualified and, you've been able to complete the intake, get them in for that consult. Follow-up, Anthony also asked, so how are these intake questions altered if the initial call is handled by an intake person instead of the attorney? Great question. I'll let you take that, Nick.
Yeah. So Anthony, I would not alter the questions at all. Obviously, the more experience you have in performing the intake, the more you're going to be able to kind of improvise with that person. But if you have an intake person instead of the attorney on the phone, I would have them ask the same standardized questions. And then if that intake person only specializes in intake and not really converting that customer and getting them to really retain you, I would just have them ask the questions, try to get them to schedule the consultation with you, which is really, it's similar to what I do with like the free trial, and give them something actionable to do. So, awaiting a phone call and scheduling that appointment is really good. But if they're waiting to hear back from you, you want to give them like a timetable that they should expect to hear back from you, not like the cable company, 12 hours, really like an actual time. But yeah, don't alter the intake questions at all. You want to make sure that you're getting the correct information and that it's really tailored to qualifying that lead for you.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. That's great. Just got a direct question from Steven to me. He says, can you actually automate the lead follow-up process? So yes, absolutely. I highly recommend, like I touched on just briefly in the presentation, there's a lot of moving parts, right? And you want to kind of provide the most tailored content possible to your prospects. So that will, to set up a comprehensive wow package and then an ongoing drip nurturing sequence, just writing all of that content, is a bit of a time commitment, certainly. But again, once you write it once, you can really load it into an autoresponder, an automated drip campaign, any email software that you would use, MailChimp, Constant Contact, your CRM, maybe even your practice management system. Most of those tools, of those software, it comes standard, right? So it's pretty easy to set up. But absolutely, it must be automated. There need to be triggers. So, when a prospect comes through, that triggers this, automated comprehensive sequence. And just so you know, that is all included in our Marketing Amplifier program. So if you're interested in learning more, we can certainly talk about that offline. But yes, automate for sure. Okay, so Tamara, this is a good Nick question. So is there a point during the intake process where you try to figure out if the person is a good fit with regards to the budget and the firm's typical retainer pricing range? Great question. Or is that done during a consultation with the attorney? Nick, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is a great question. And Cara, I loved how you answered that previous question. I was just sitting here nodding I feel like a bobblehead when I'm talking to you. So is there a point during the intake process where you try to see if the potential new client is a good fit with regards to their budget and the firm's typical retainer pricing range? Yeah, I would definitely cover that after the intake process. So if part of your intake is that their sort of problem aligns with what you actually do and you're able to help them, then yes, after asking the questions, I would just tell them, hey, typically we charge anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for this type of thing. Is that something you'd be able to pay for? Would you need a payment plan if that's something that you offer? But I would be very straight up with the person and not waste either of your time, because if they can't afford it, you're not going to be able to help them, and you don't want to waste your time where you could be helping other clients. So I would just be as honest as possible after you ask the specific intake questions, if that's something that you're worried about.
Yeah, good response. I agree. So we're butting up against kind of the end of our time, but I do see one more question, Nick, I definitely want you to be able to answer. Does answering legal charge for the minutes for answering spoof, sales, spam calls to the firm?
No, we don't. So we only count minutes we say for things that pertain to your business. So if it's an existing client or a potential new client, or like a judge calling you, that counts towards your minutes. But if your mom's calling you and she wants to let you know that she made your favorite spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, that's no charge.
Hey, but that's great news, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I don't see any more questions coming in now, but again, feel free to reach out to myself. Feel free to reach out directly to Nick. Nick, it was an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge. Thanks everyone out there. Join us next week for another session, and stay safe. All right.
Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.